So not everyone has the same understanding of what Veterans Day means.
Not every state gets a day off to even remember it.
Different from Memorial Day, Veterans Day is to honor the living.
To honor the ones you know, to honor the ones who have fought throughout history for our freedom.
It started the day the Allies made peace with the Germans.
To end World War I.
On the 11th hour.
The 11th day.
On the 11th month.
Hence, November 11th.
It's on November 11th at 11 o'clock in downtown Redmond on 6th Street. There's a parade honoring veterans.
We don't spend our time at school, so we should be spending our day
honoring them,
valuing them,
respecting them,
and thanking them for their service.
Hello Ridgeview, this is Alexander Palacios. Today we're presenting an extended special edition of the Ravens Report in celebration of Veterans Day. We were lucky enough to have 5 veterans come into the studio. The interviews were compelling and insightful, and we present them to you now.
My name is Frank Graham, and I think probably historically I had little choice. I was born in an Army hospital. My dad was a 37-year military veteran, both Marine Corps and subsequently Army. And I grew up all over the world during his Army career. And I really had no other goal in mind other than a career in the military. Although, as I was in high school, and I graduated from high school in Medford High School in 1966, I wanted to be in the Navy. And I wanted to fly jets. And I'm too tall to fly jets. I couldn't fit in the ejection seat. My spine is too long. So, and then I found out I had to wear glasses, so I was disqualified from the academies. So I went to the University of Oregon, got my commission through the ROTC program, and then spent almost 26 years batting around the world in the Army. And it was a fine career. I retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1991 actually in Montana. My last active duty station was in Montana. But I served 3 tours in Germany, all of them during the Cold War, and 2 of them in border cavalry regiments. My first 2 tours were in the border cavalry regiments on the old wall between East and West Germany. I did a tour in Vietnam. I commanded a cavalry troop in the 11th Armored Cavalry there, ground cavalry, although we had helicopters too. And ended up doing staff tours. My last one before going to Montana was in the Pentagon when I was on an Army-wide inspection team visiting all over the world. So it was a good life.
Yeah. And you certainly have a lot of experience to draw from for this question, but if you had to choose a defining lesson of your military career, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Completely apart from all of the technical things that you end up doing, completely apart from all of the tactic skills or the strategy lessons that you learn. Fundamentally, being a soldier is about living and working with people. When I was in Vietnam, shortly after I got there, I was a troop commander, company commander, and we were on an operation where we were showing essentially propaganda films in small villages, trying to convince the local people that they really wanted to sign up with the current administration. And you're apolitical in the service by and large, and in fact, by law, you're not even allowed to participate in any kind of outside political activity. But we were showing these films, and I had a young man who was assigned to the unit as a medic who was a conscientious objector. Do you know what a conscientious objector is?
Yes, I do, but if you could explain.
It's someone who has a very strong moral disbelief in armed conflict. And we had a draft. So young people who were conscientious objectors ended up getting drafted. Some of them were released from their service obligation, but some of them chose to serve and they were completely unarmed. They refused to carry arms. They ended up being chaplain's assistants and things of that ilk where they were supposedly not exposed to direct combat. Well, my CO chaplain's assistant was operating the film camera that night in this small village. And right at the end of the evening, a local Vietnamese fellow who we thought was in part of the local regional self-defense force walked around the corner of the truck as we were packing everything up and shot him in the chest, and he died in my arms. And that was my first experience with that. And I think that was the lesson that said one of my most critical responsibilities. We have a saying: you take care of the mission and the men. Mm-hmm. And typically the men come second to the mission. But if you take care of the men, the mission will frequently take care of itself. And I was in a part of the service during that time where there were no women involved, but certainly that was a humbling lesson, and it really opened my eyes to how important it was to take care of soldiers. And they would take care of you in return. It's a two-way street.
All right. Moving on to, this is a high school, and a lot of us are deciding what we're going to do
Sure.
with our future. What advice would you give to young people, especially those interested in a military career?
Do whatever you can to explore all of the options that you can possibly think of. Okay. For those people who are interested in going to college, college can be a wonderful place to explore. You take courses in, your first 2 years are pretty basic. So open your eyes, look around, be aware of what's going on, and be willing to challenge yourself. To say, what did that mean to me? Mm-hmm. Did I find a passion there? Was it interesting? Or maybe that's not for me. Maybe that's mom or dad pushing me in a direction I really don't want to go, or my friends, or some group of people you're working with. Explore. It's a great big world out there, and there's a lot of things that people can do. Not everybody needs to go to college to get have an absolutely wonderful life for themselves. I guess I've subscribed to one of the beliefs of St. Augustine, mm-hmm. And that is that he says that life is a book, and the one who does not travel reads but one page. So travel is an eye-opener too, and you don't have to do it expensively. Figure out a way to buy that Eurail pass that'll get you on and off a train wherever you want to be in Europe. Figure out a way to travel your own country. It's a huge, marvelous place, and along the way you might find that passion. Along the way you might find that trigger that says, this is what I want to be, this is who I really am.
All right. Our final question, we're making this video for Veterans Day. Mm-hmm. What does Veterans Day mean to you? What does it mean to the community around you?
Redmond's really a very veteran appreciating community. Mm-hmm. I've never felt more welcome as a veteran in a community than I have living in Redmond. We've been here for 6 years now, and we like being here. I'm a member of the VFW, but really Veterans Day is a day for, we do the celebration. Of course, it's fun to do the parade and to be out front a little bit. I guess that appeals to the ham in all of us, to be in the parade. But I think more than anything, it's an opportunity to reflect on how we got here and why we did what we did to help us get here, and take a little bit of pride. An expression of your pride, I guess, is marching in that parade or watching it, and being able to say, I had a small part, a really small part, but I had a small part in allowing 2,000 people to line the street in Redmond, Oregon, and watch a bunch of people parade down Main Street or 6th Street. It's just an opportunity to reflect.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. It was a good ride.
I am Patty Oliver, and I served in the Marine Corps from 1979 to 1983. I had a basic 3043 MOS, and I was a supply administration, and I was stationed on the West Coast in Camp Pendleton, California. Pretty much just did administration work, and just not very exciting kind of stuff, but it is important that you have the gear to get the people that are in the field. You have to take care of them.
Okay. Why the Marine Corps? What events or decisions were made that led you to that branch?
Well, it was actually quite accidental. I had started off deciding I was going to go into the Air Force. I had pretty much talked to my parents about it. I was going into as a senior in high school, and went down to the recruiting offices in Clearwater, Florida, where they had all of them in one place, and just went into the recruiting office. And they looked at me and they said, "Well, do you know what you want to do?" And I said, well, no, I'm 17. I don't know what to do. You know, what do you have to offer? You know. So they said, "Well, here, take these pamphlets and come back later." I think they had their quota, so they weren't really interested. So I stepped back out on the sidewalk, and I'm like, well, that wasn't very fun. I didn't get to talk to anybody. And I'm looking at the other offices, and there's the Coast Guard and the Marines and the Navy and the Army, and I'm like, one by one, I'm ticking them off in my mind going, no, 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 no. I finally was sitting there looking at the Marine Corps office, and my father had been in the Marine Corps in the Pacific and in World War II. And I thought, well, they sure look good. I guess I'll go talk to them. So I went inside, and Gunnery Sergeant Sepulveda gets a hold of me, and he says, "Well, come on over here, and we'll talk to you. We'll tell you all about the Marine Corps, you know." And so they did, and you know, convinced me that that's what I wanted to do. And so I went home and rode all the way back from Clearwater down to Dunedin, which is about an 8-mile ride on a bicycle. And came in the house and called my dad, and I said, "Dad, I decided what I'm going to do." And he says, "What's that?" He's in the restroom, and I said, "Well," I said, "I'm going to join the Marine Corps." I thought he was going to just have a heart attack. So, and went from there. And I went to boot camp in 1979, right out of high school. And my parents came up to Parris Island to see me graduate. And it was going all the way races from there.
Wow. All right. My next question would be sort of a defining moment in your military career, one solid lesson that you learned it, if you had to tell one lesson.
I would say probably the defining lesson was overcoming all of your fears, all of your uncertainties as to whether you could do something. And boot camp was a great deal of that to a certain degree, except that we weren't getting some of the same training that our male counterparts were getting at that time. We were not, certainly now they are allowed in combat, so we weren't even allowed even to go to the range at that point. I didn't get any training on that until after I was actually out in the FMF. But just overcoming your fears was one of the greatest things. And really what cinched it was when I was out in Camp Pendleton in the division supply. I worked in the staff headquarters in G4, and our supply inspection team comes back and they said, "Well, we've been challenged by the 1st Recon Battalion to come out and go rappelling with them." And I didn't even know what rappelling was. And I'm thinking, well, somebody says, you know, coming off a rock or something, okay. So we went out there to train with these guys, you know, and because they said, "Well, you have to bring your women along too," you know. We're considered office pogues, that they call us, you know. So we went out there and we started training, and then they take us up on this tower and make you rappel down off this tower. And I have a sincere fear of heights, and to overcome that, and you know, Marines are fearless, so you have to do it or die. You just got to do it. And I overcame my fear and went down that tower, and it was a good feeling, you know. And I went back to our offices that day, and we were all, you know, rah-rah, pumped up. And then they said, "Well, the next day we're going out in the helicopter. We're going to jump out of a big Chinook," you know. And I'm going, I'm not going out in no helicopters. But we did, and I was very, very afraid to do that. I remember that my sergeant tried to tell me, he said, "Well, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure that if you can't do it, we'll let you out." I'm going, "Sure." They got me between two guys. The crew chief looks at me and he says, "You." And I'm going, "Me?" He goes, and he's wearing big black goggles, and he says, "You." And I can't hear him, and I can't hear what he's saying. He says, "You," and he's pointing to this big square hole in the middle of the bird. He says, and he mouths to me, "There's only one way out." And I'm thinking, I'm going to die right now. So got up, hooked up, and I looked down at the guy. They have a guy that's on belay. He's holding the rope down there. The problem is that the big rope that you're going down, it doesn't give you much slack to pull it back around in a break. I went down halfway before I could stop. I got pretty badly blistered and hurt pretty bad. But you know, yeah, you overcome your fears. You know, that's what the Marines teaches you. Overcome your fears, be a team, and you know, fight on for the next day. So that's instilled in me.
All right. So we're making this video for Veterans Day, to celebrate Veterans Day. What does Veterans Day mean to you, and what does it mean to the community around you?
Well, I would say what it means to me, I've had a long line of military people that have all served. All my uncles served, my father served. I have a niece currently serving in the Navy. I have a son that's serving in the Marine Corps, like his mother. So he's a third generation. I believe that every young person probably should spend 2 or 3 years in the military. I think it really does them a lot of good in growing up and maturing. And you should to learn to serve your country. I mean, people don't care enough about their country anymore. And I think it's important that they have an opportunity to learn to really appreciate the freedoms that we have. And I think it's being lost every day because we don't have enough people willing to serve. I would say that that's a great deal of what it means to me. And I respect and those that have gone before us and those that we have lost in combat, you know, and didn't come back. We serve on because in memory of those people, because they will never get to be with their families again. So if we can do some small things to help other veterans, or if we can help at a funeral and we can honor that veteran. We have a Marine that passed away in band that as part of our Marine Corps League that passed away of World War II, and he was in the Battle of Iwo Jima. And we are going to honor him at his funeral, you know, and that's what it's about, you know, remembering and being patriotic. I hope that the rest of the community tries to feel the same way. I love to see the people on Veterans Day in the parade, and they're taking their covers off and they're putting their hand over their heart, you know, and those are the people that I'm glad that they remember, you know, and we strive to teach young people what we can through our programs, the VFW and the auxiliary programs. We strive to try to teach patriotism in the schools and in our community, and it's very important so that, you know, we can continue on to have the great country that we have.
My name is Art Horsel. I served in the Navy. Like a lot of guys stayed 20 years, but 3 years and 8 months was enough. I didn't get what I wanted when I went in. You go in, you want to be on a carrier, you know, if you get the aviation rate. I studied to be a mechanic, and when they took us back to Norfolk, Virginia, they cut us apart by alphabet. And the guys from the A's into the H's, Bernay, my name got a carrier. I got a photographic squadron. And I was pretty down in the dumps, but as time went on, we went to Dominican. The first time I was out, we went to Dominican Republic and was done mapping, and then next trip out was Venezuela, and then we went to Mexico.
Why the Navy? What drew you to the Navy, or what led you to that?
Well, in the war with Japan, in order to get there, the Navy was the easiest way. And it seemed like I waited. I'm a farm boy, and I waited till May till all the crops were in. And I told my brother, he was 4F, he was sick when he was young. And, I'm going, so didn't get to go to Japan. I got a picture of I was at Pearl Harbor or Venzer, but I had a safe career.
If you had to pick a main lesson from your service, what would you say was a main lesson?
Well, I don't know of any main lesson, but some of the problems we had can be confronted with being an aviation machinist, they kind of got into your patience. Mm-hmm. But overall, it was I was doing flying. I was a crew member, you know, plane captain, mm-hmm. And that made me happy.
We're young people about to start our lives, and what advice would you give to these young people, especially those interested in a military career?
I really don't know. The world has changed so fast. It's I don't know what I could say except when you get in there, I just do like the chief told us when we signed in. Do what you're told and don't volunteer for anything.
All right. So we're making this for Veterans Day. And what does Veterans Day mean to you? And what does it mean to the community around you?
Well, it means quite a lot. It means remember those that didn't come back. That's mainly the thing.
My name's Jeff Chappell, and I served in the Marine Corps in 1970 and 1974. We were one of the last Marines in Vietnam until 1975 when they evacuated the embassy, but we were the last combat Marines in Vietnam.
Marines.
That's correct.
What led you to the Marines? What sort of drove you toward that?
I had a lot of friends that I grew up with that went in the Marine Corps. It was sort of a neighborhood thing. Mm-hmm. Also, it was a test to myself. You know, the Marine Corps had the reputation of being the hardest and the toughest, and I wanted to see if I measured up.
During your service, if you could pick out a defining lesson, a main lesson out of all of that.
I would say learning that you never know what your ultimate limit is, that you can keep pushing yourself. Like you hear the sports coaches all say, give 110%. Well, you can't ever give more than 100%, mm-hmm. and nobody ever gives 100% until the final moment. Mm-hmm. To give 100% is to give it all. In that, supposedly the legend of the marathon runner, when he ran 26 miles to declare the victory, and he died mm-hmm. when he got to Athens and said victory, mm-hmm. Nike. So that's giving 100%.
As a young person, I would like to know what advice you could give to young people who are looking to start their lives, especially those interested in a military career.
Yeah, it's not the easiest way to go, but sometimes I would say it's the safest way to go. When you leave high school, you have a lot of protection in high school. You have a lot of adults, a lot of people there looking out for you. Your mistakes are pointed out. You're guided. Then you'll graduate from high school, you go off to college or get a job, and you're kind of thrown out on your own. You're on the police officer is not going to have as much sympathy with you, mm-hmm. but in the service, you're going into another, don't want to call it a protected environment, but a more sympathetic environment, mm-hmm. where you screw up, your drill instructor is going to chew you out up one side, down the other, and make you feel pretty bad, but he's not going to throw you in jail for screwing up. He's not going to fail your class for screwing up. He's not going to cycle you back and make you do it, say you're not good enough. If you're not good enough, there's got to be a lot of reasons. So in some ways, the military gives you time to learn in a semi-protected environment. Veterans Day is not to celebrate, but to honor those who have served and come back, while Memorial Day is to remember those that gave their final measure in combat. So there's two distinct holidays. Veterans. What's it mean to me? It means finally there's a little recognition for what we did and what we sacrificed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my name is Alan Starr. I was in the Navy for 30 years. I did 27 as a UDT SEAL member. I'm originally from Oregon. I was born in Astoria, raised in Nehalem, Manzanita area, down just south of there. Went to 4 different high schools in 4 different years, and moved from 3 different states. Got a chance to go into, had one of those life-changing moments with my father, in case you ever get one of those decisions. I went to college and didn't do too good, so I was looking at a junior college to go to, and my dad told me that, son, you had your chance. Now either get a job or join the military. So I was at Pendleton at the time, going back to LeGrand, and so I figured, well, okay, that drive, I figured I'd be a real man and join the service, get a little experience around the world. On that drive back, I thought, if I'm going to be a real man, I'll join the Marine Corps. I walked in the Marine Corps recruiter, and this is during Vietnam. If you dropped out of college, you're going in the military one way or the other. Went in to see the military recruiter, had his feet up on a desk reading a comic book, and he asked me what I wanted. I said, I want to see about joining, and he said, no, I'm kind of busy right now. I'll go down and see another recruiter. So I left there. I packed my stuff up, went back to Philomath, where we were living with my parents. Went into Corvallis, saw a Navy recruiter the following week, and that guy greeted me just like I was long lost prodigal son coming home. Mm-hmm. Promised me everything in the world, and I thought, oh my God, this is a great deal. Next thing you know, I'm on my way to San Diego, go to boot camp. Graduated from there, went to a school to be a storekeeper. When I graduated from that, I got sent to Exmouth, Western Australia. There was a new base they were building down there. And I got a chance to be on the ground floor to put that base together, and then got selected to be the guy in charge of raising the first American flag on that base. And while I was there was a couple of guys that had dropped out of the basic UDT SEAL training. And I had accomplished a lot in Australia. And less than a year, I went from a E2, which is a seaman apprentice, to an E5 in the Navy in less than a year. And you just can't do that anymore. So I had already gotten a set of orders, so time for me to rotate out of Australia. So I went to an aircraft carrier, USS Oriskany. And when I got aboard there, put in for the BUDS training. And all of a sudden, I got the orders on a Wednesday to report by Friday. And next thing I know, I got my bag packed and in San Diego, Coronado, and started the training. After the training, that's 6 months long. Then you got jump school and a whole bunch of other different things like that. So, and that started my career in the Navy. That was 3 years into a 4-year career. There's no way in the world I wanted to be a lifer. There was no way. And once I got in the teams, next thing I know, 30 years went by, and it was time to come back to God's country. So that's kind of some of the experiences. I know I've got a whole list of things there that we can talk about too.
Okay. I think where we want to go with this is, if you think way back, I know you talked a little bit about it, but if you could just go more in depth on what drove you toward the Navy.
Okay.
The Navy.
And another thing I bring up is when I'm talking to different classes and schools and stuff like that is how I got through how I got through school, mm-hmm. and why I ended up in the Navy. I can do that too.
Okay.
When I was, a lot of people wonder how, what keeps you motivated to go through school, especially nowadays. Well, I was an athlete. I like playing sports. And as everybody knows, on Friday, your grade point average is looked at very closely. And if you don't get the grade point average up there, no matter how minimum it is, you're not going to play. So that was one of the reasons that I played a lot of sports. I'm lucky enough to be in small schools where I got to play all 4 sports. And so I had to work hard to maintain the grade point average enough where I could play. And then after I got out of graduated from high school, I had gone in Philomath, Oregon. I was the number 1 in our district for the 880 half mile, and so I got a chance to go to state. And with that, my grades, I did not have very good study habits, and they followed me to my first college at LeGrand. But my dad was able to get me in talking to my track coach, who knew the the coach there was able to get me in, and that's how I kind of got started to get through school. So, not an easy path. It's better. I look back at it now, and I sure wish I would have studied harder, did a bunch of different things. But like I was saying earlier about seeing a Marine recruiter, my dad was in the Navy. Mm-hmm. World War II, his ship was kamikazed over in Leyte Gulf, and the ship sank. So when I couldn't get into the Marine Corps, thank God, I went right straight to the Navy. Because I looked at some of the benefits. There was the GI Bill, 4 years, and a chance to travel, get away from the United States if it was possible, enjoy and see some of the world. So when I came back, I would be more ready to settle down, raise a family, go to school, do whatever has to be done.
You have a lot to draw from here, but I think if you had to pick a defining lesson or maybe an overarching lesson that you learned, that would be what?
Okay, one of the defining things I think was, and again, you never know what you're going to get into sometimes until you finally get there. My first 3 years of the Navy, it was the basic training, A school to pick up my rating, raise the American flag, building that base in Exmouth, Australia, and then the aircraft carrier aboard the ship with 5,000 other people. Those were all fine, but once I got to BUDS training, the basic underwater demolition SEAL training, I'd heard some stuff about it, but you can never know what it's like until you actually experience. Once you get through that training, and 4th week of the training phase is what we call Hell Week. That's where you go from Sunday to the following Friday or Saturday morning without any sleep. And you go 24 hours at a time. After you finish that, then you finish the rest of your diving and your demo and our land warfare phase. That's what I'm looking for. You finish that, and once you finish that training, I think I have fallen back on that so many times, and you'll talk to Green Berets and Army Rangers that go through their courses, the same thing. But with the SEALs, our course is one of the most difficult ones you could possibly go to in the military. And once you finish that, there is nothing you cannot do. When I was going through school, to be a speaker or anything like that, or stand up in front of my speech class, I could do the paperwork, but when I stand up to do the 1-minute talk, I'd take an F. The largest crowd I've ever talked to is probably 20,000 people. And that's what somebody just came in and said, we lost a speaker, can you come in and do a guest speak? Mm-hmm. And it was like, well, okay. And you just do it. You just go through it, and it's taught me that no matter what it is, how challenging things are, you will always be able to get through it if you take that first step. So that's probably the most defining thing in my career, other than having my kids and stuff like that.
All right. I think last question we're going to ask is, we're making this for Veterans Day.
Right.
What does Veterans Day mean to you and the community around you?
Well, Veterans Day, that's when we salute all the veterans that have fought in a foreign war someplace or joined the military on their own accord. We do not have the draft. Back in my days, they did. And be just like, you guys don't have to worry about it. You sign up for it, but you never have to worry about being an all-volunteer force. And the stuff that we have going around the world right now, these people that get out there and go and do this stuff, been there, done that. But it's a chance for me to look at another veteran in the eye, and only he knows what we've both been through, mm-hmm. and what we sacrificed with family, with everything else. So that's what Veterans Day means to me, is being able to have a chance to share with other veterans. And on a program like what you have right here, it gives a chance to hopefully give a little bit more wisdom out there what I went through. The Apollo 13, when I first graduated out of BUDS training, I went to UDT 13, Underwater Demolition Team 13. And again, I graduated out of, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be well well-rounded. So I kept going in and seeing the operations officer and the training officers, and that's where assignments come in for all the people that want to go to school or do different things. And I kept bugging them, and they tell me, go away, go away. One day I walked in and they said, Star, we got you covered. You're going to go on Apollo 13. And I'm going, great. What's Apollo 13? I didn't have a clue. And it ended up being that I got volunteered. There's, on the Apollo teams that we had back in those days, there was 2 3-man crews. One is the primary crew. That's the one that actually picks up the astronauts. And then there's a backup crew, which is your primary responsibility is picking up parachutes once they fall off the thing, so they can bring them back aboard and check them out, see how everything worked. Well, we both crews trained. One day you're a simulated astronaut, you go out and do our recovery procedures, and then you come and jump in the water, they hoist you up, bring you back aboard the ship. And so we both cross-trained. Now the squadrons that the Hilo squadron we fly with, the primary bird is, of course, the CO of the command, and the executive officer follows the backup. And during the actual recovery itself, we watched it come through the sky, parachutes opened, everything's going great, and we moved into position to start the recovery. And somebody, someplace, higher than my pay grade, decided that saw the parachutes starting to sink. They had the primary bird move forward and pick those up, and then we got put in the primary slot to actually pick the astronauts off.
The egress raft is in the water, approximately 10 feet from the command module. Two swimmers have the raft in hand and are swimming it to the command module.
Well, when I'm sitting there in the airplane or the helicopter, it's not like we're talking here or in the movies. You got to really scream to be heard, unless you're on the intercom. Well, that day, I watched the thing come through, standard procedure, everybody in position. So there's a lot of gear we have to wear once we jump in the water. I'd already taken my tanks off, all the equipment that I have to carry with me once I jump in the water. And all of a sudden, there's a air crewman in the door. He's got the door slit open, and his eyes get about this big, and I'm going. So he finally comes up and screams in my ear, "We're making the recovery. We're going in first." And I'm going, holy crap. So I start putting all my gear on. I got my other 2 guys that I'm in charge of. They're sitting across the helicopter, and I'm trying to scream at them to give me a hand. We're going in. I get all my tanks on, my radio gear, cameras, a whole bunch of other different things. And I'm standing at the door directing the air crewman to tell the pilot where I want to jump into the, pick up the where I want to meet that capsule. And I looked down at my fins. I had forgot to put my fins on. If I'd jumped in, it had been 3 or 4 miles later below the sea before they would have found me again. So then we jumped out of the aircraft. Some of the procedures, I jump in first, swim over, and I've got what's called a sea anchor, and I attach that to the capsule. You open that up, it's like a parachute underwater, and it creates a drag so the thing will slow down. And then from there, I signal my 2 guys in the helicopter. They fly over, they jump in with a flotation device that goes around the capsule itself to keep it from sinking in case it takes on water. And then the air crew flies over again. When I've got that set up, the air crew flies over, throws us 2 egress rafts, and they attach to this thing, and then we open up the capsule. They get hoisted away and back to the ship.
On behalf of myself and the rest of us at the Ravens Report, to these veterans and to others around the country, for your service, for your sacrifice, thank you. I'm Alexander Palacios with the Ravens Report.